Sorry. Okay. Have you ever felt unprepared for something? Like you show up and there's a test that you didn't know about and you had not studied at all, and so you just end up guessing on all the answers? Or you go to gym class and you were not prepared with all of your gym clothes, so then you have to run the mile in your jeans. That stinks. Or the worst, you're in the hallway in between classes and your crush, who you've been scoping out for a while, walks up to you and you say nothing because you're totally unprepared for that conversation. So for me, there was this one time I can think of that I was really unprepared. I was supposed to go camping with some friends and it was supposed to be a really fun trip, and I had no idea what to bring for camping, so I just picked up a sleeping bag like at Walmart. Well, turns out that was a terrible idea, because the sleeping bag I bought was meant for summer weather, and where I was going, it was winter. So essentially every night I almost froze to death, and it was a miracle that I didn't lose a toe to frostbite or something, because it was brutal cold. And I just remember thinking I've never been so unprepared in my life. So earlier we talked about kind of some more funny examples of being unprepared, but let's get honest for just a second, okay? There are a lot of times in life where really tough things happen, trials and temptations, and sometimes we really just don't know how to get out of those. We don't really know how to prepare for those. For some of you, it could be that you've got a family member with a really serious illness and you're not sure if they're gonna make it. Or maybe for you, you struggle with depression, you feel just a lot of insecurity and doubt, and you don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. Or maybe your friends are starting to get involved in the party scene and you don't really want to go there, but you don't know how to stay away from that peer pressure. So every single person, we all face battles in life. And I'm not just talking physical battles, but really spiritual battles as well. We all face trials, temptations, we face tests in life. And no one is exempt from that, not even Jesus himself. But here's the truth. We all face trials in life, we all face battles, but we can be prepared to win. Jesus shows us exactly how to prepare to win those battles. We see it in Matthew chapter 4, where Jesus is being tempted by Satan. Take a fruit and maple, orange juice, small. But here's the good news. You see, Satan only has 3 tricks up his sleeve. He does the same 3 things over and over and over again, so we already know his playbook. Let me set this story up for you a little bit. Jesus was just baptized, and now he's heading out to the desert. He just wants to be alone, to clear his mind, and just have some time to think about what's coming up for him. So let's pick up the story in Matthew chapter 4. In verse 1, it starts like this. It says, "Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted there by the devil. For 40 days and 40 nights, he fasted and he became very hungry." So what is Jesus doing here? Well, it's a little bit like spring training for baseball or dress rehearsal before a play. He's really going to prepare himself for what's coming up next. Okay, so here's where we are. Jesus just made a public declaration. That's when he was baptized. And now he is going to get his mind right before he goes out to tell everyone else how they can also have a relationship with God. So he goes out into the desert to really get his mind focused. He hasn't eaten in 40 days. Satan ends up testing Jesus 3 different times. And like I said, These are the same 3 tricks that he uses on us now today. And so let's take a look and see how Jesus actually responds to all 3 of those tests. In verse 3, we see the first way. So read this with me in Matthew chapter 4, verse 3. It says, "During that time, the devil came and said to him, 'If you are truly the Son of God, tell these stones to become loaves of bread.'" So what that verse is telling us is that Satan is trying to trip Jesus up using self-gratification. Basically, just do whatever feels good. And he did it really strategically. Did you see how he did it? He waited until Jesus was tired and hungry and out here in the desert all alone. He knew Jesus was vulnerable because, let's be real, we all know how we feel when we get #hangry, okay? It's rough. And so Satan knew exactly what he was doing. He was waiting for just the right moment. And that's exactly what Satan does with us as well. He waits until we're vulnerable. He waits until we have a fight with our parents, and then you start thinking about running away. Or maybe your boyfriend breaks up with you, and so you get back at him by bashing him on social media. Or somebody at school says something that hurts your feelings, and so you go home and decide to hurt yourself. You cut or you take pills. This is exactly how Satan works. He waits quietly and patiently until we're vulnerable, and then he attacks. So you see, that's exactly what he did with Jesus. He used his circumstances to get to him. He told him, turn those stones into bread after he'd been fasting for 40 days. Man, think about that. Take a second, turn to the person next to you, tell them whatever your favorite food is. That's really good. One more bite. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of it. For me, it's cookies. Man, I love cookies, but I would love them even more had I been out here in the desert for 40 days with no food. So let's see how Jesus responds. In verse 4, he said, "No," the scriptures say, "people do not live by bread alone, but they live by every word that comes from the mouth of God." So basically he's saying that nothing in this world is as good. Nothing, not even a cookie after 40 days of not eating, is as good as being close to God. Jesus battled Satan by quoting the scripture. So Jesus resists, but Satan keeps pushing him. And in verse 5, we see that Satan comes at him again. So let's check out what happens in verse 5. It says, "The devil took him," that's Jesus, "to the holy city, Jerusalem, to the highest point of the temple. And he said, 'If you're truly the Son of God, jump off. For the scriptures say that he will order his angels to protect you, and they will hold you up with their hands.'" The first way that Satan tried to trick Jesus and tempt him was with self-gratification. And now we see in this verse that the test he's giving Jesus is with pride. So at first glance, this verse seems a little weird even. It doesn't seem that tempting for Jesus to jump off a cliff, right? But here's what Satan's actually doing. He's tempting him with pride. He's saying, hey, if you're really the Son of God, then prove it. If we're honest with ourselves, we get tempted like that all the time. We want to brag about our accomplishments because we want people to think that we're important. And so maybe we even exaggerate the truth a little. Or there's someone at school that's a little bit different than us, and so we make fun of them to make ourselves feel better. Or there's this chore at home that your mom wants you to do, and it's just kind of gross. I don't want to clean the toilet, I don't want to take out the trash, and so you just say no. You get an argument because you feel like you're too good to do that. And Satan tempts us with pride all the time. So pride, that's what Satan is tempting us with all the time, and that's exactly how he's trying to get to Jesus in this scripture. So let's take a look at verse 7 and we'll see Jesus' response. He says this, he says, "The scriptures also say, you must not test the Lord your God." Once again, Jesus uses scripture to defeat the test, to defeat the temptation that Satan is throwing at him. Essentially what Jesus is doing here is he's using scripture to show Satan that It would be wrong for him to abuse his power. Instead, Jesus models for us exactly how we should live our lives, that he came to serve, not to be served. So we shouldn't think of ourselves as too good or better than anyone or too cool or above anything, because Jesus shows us that's not the way to live. Satan has one last trick up his sleeve, and so he takes Jesus to the top of a giant mountain, and he really feels like this is the way he's gonna trip him up. And don't miss this, because Satan will do the exact same thing with you and I. Let's read it in verse 8. It says, "Next, the devil took Jesus to the peak of a very high mountain and showed him all of the kingdoms of all of the world in their glory. He said, 'I will give everything to you if you will kneel down and worship me.'" So first, Satan tried to appeal to Jesus. He tried to test him with self-gratification. Next, we saw Jesus get tempted with pride. And the third and final way that Satan tries to get not just Jesus, but you and I both, is by saying, hey, you deserve it. Think of something you want bad. Like seriously, you want this so bad. Take a second and think about it. Maybe it's a new Xbox or a brand new pair of shoes, or you wanted a new car, or you wanted to make the team. You wanted to make the grade, you wanted to get into that college, or you wanted to be liked by these certain people. What is it that you want so bad? Now take a second and think, what if someone told you that you could have that and everything else in the world if you just took 1 second to kneel down? Just 1 second. This is exactly what Jesus faced here, because Satan said, all you have to do is kneel. And so Jesus realized that, and he was all alone in the desert. Who would even know if he knelt down even for just 1 second? And sometimes it's easy for us to feel like that too. I could just cheat on this one test. It doesn't really matter that much. Nobody's going to know. I can say something I'm not supposed to say. I can sneak out and go to this party. I can look at porn when I'm alone. I can do things and no one will know, so it's probably not a big deal. But that's not true. Jesus knew what was at stake. He knew that by kneeling down, he would completely go around everything that he was sent to earth to do. He was sent to earth here to live a life and then die a really painful death so that you and I could have a relationship with God. Even if he took just 1 second to kneel down in the desert alone, he knew that he'd be giving us up. He knew that we would no longer have a chance to have a relationship with God. And so Jesus knew what was at stake. So that's why when Satan threw this third temptation at him, when he tried to trick him into saying, hey, you deserve this is exactly what Jesus did. He battled it with scripture again. This is Jesus' response in verse 10. He says, "Get out of here, Satan. For the scriptures say, you must worship the Lord your God and serve only him." So again, Jesus won the battle. He won against tests and temptations and trials because he used scripture. He was prepared. He knew the scripture and he used it against Satan when Satan threw all sorts of circumstances at him. So again, Satan has 3 tricks and 3 tricks only. He used them against Jesus. He uses them against us today. But we already know this, so we can be prepared. The 3 things he does over and over again. He tests us with self-gratification. He tempts us to use pride. And then he really tries our patience by saying, hey, you deserve this. So what is yours today? Is it self-gratification? Satan is tempting you to just do whatever feels good. Maybe for you it's pride. And Satan is really testing you because you want to be prideful and feel like you're too good to do something or too cool to be part of something. Or maybe for you today, the test is that really you feel like Satan is telling you, hey, you deserve this. You can do whatever you want and that's okay because you deserve it. Whatever the temptation is, whatever the trial is, we've learned from Jesus that we can battle it all and we can win the battle by turning to God, by being prepared with scripture. So remember, we fight a battle every single day. But we can win that battle, we can win that war when we're prepared with scripture. We all face battles in life, but with scripture, we can be prepared to win.